So let me also thank the Fair Oaks Library. It's really gracious of them to host us here tonight. We appreciate being here. Appreciate Peninsula Television being here. Hi, Mom. And thank you so much to the Santa Clara County Poet Laureate, who Carolyn will probably introduce later, but let me just give a shout out to Santa Clara County Poet Laureate David Perez. David, thank you for coming. So, Marcy wrote this script for me, but I'm not going to use it, okay? I'm sorry. But the power of poetry is transformative. That's an important point. The power of poetry is transformative. I'm going to tell you a little story. Had our last Poet Laureate event, which was in Belmont at the Belmont Library. Lovely event, 60 or 70 people. There were a lot of kids that evening who were reading their poetry. And one young man in particular, his name was Paul. He's a fourth grader. And his name was called. He got up out of his seat. He walked with absolute poise to the podium in front of all these people, a group like this. And he read his poem. And he read his poem with total confidence. It was amazing how poised he was at the podium reading. So later on, his teacher, Paul's teacher, pulls me aside and she says, "Supervisor, I am so thankful that you did this poetry event. And Carolyn, I'm so thankful." "You're welcome." She said, "No, you don't understand, Supervisor." She said that for the first year, since September, she had been trying to draw this young boy out of his shell. Turned out that he was painfully shy, never ever talked in class, never talked one-on-one to the teacher unless she forced him, never raised his hand to answer a question, never ever did any of those things. And yet, he got to the podium and he read his poem, and you would have never guessed that that was what was going on with him. It brought him, for that moment in time with his poem, out of his shell, out of his cocoon, and he read like a true professional. It was amazing to watch and to hear about his story. So that's what I mean by, that's just one example of what I mean by the power of poetry is transformative. It truly is, not only in that way, but in many, many other ways. And speaking of that, let me just say how proud I am to have started the Poet Laureate program in San Mateo County. So let's hashtag give it up for Supervisor Slocum. When we first started, I've forgotten exactly how many applicants we had for Poet Laureate, but a good number of people. We invited them in to read poetry in front of this body, and we finally made our decision. And I think it was a decision that was spot on because we selected Carolyn Goodwin as San Mateo County's first Poet Laureate. So she started this campaign called Poetry Is. In February, it was Poetry is Love, and we got 1 million poems from little kids that were just the cutest things you can imagine. And of course, tonight's event is Poetry is Heritage. Well, this Poetry Is campaign was all her idea. She thought of it, created a website, and really was the one responsible for bringing us all together. Her 2-year term began, it seems like just yesterday that it began, but began in 2014, and it sadly comes to an end this December. She was born in Alaska, lives in Montera, with her husband and 2 daughters. She moved to San Mateo County in 1999 to attend Stanford University as a Wallace Stegner Fellow in Poetry. Pretty amazing. Currently, she's a professor at the California College of Arts in the MFA Writing and Undergraduate Writing and Literature programs. And she has just approached this job of being poet laureate, with boundless energy. And I want you to know that she's traveled from one end of the county to the other, to the coast, to the bay, all on her own nickel. And she has really represented the county well. And I am very proud to introduce to you Carolyn Goodwin, San Mateo County's Poet Laureate.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Slocum, and thank you so much to the wonderful people I've met who work so hard to make these things happen. You know, Marcy set up the website. I try to maintain it, and it's a challenge, but it makes me so happy to see everyone here tonight to celebrate poetry in our beautiful county and one another, and just how much we have here. And what we're going to do, we have several readers, so I selected a whole bunch of different people from across the county to come and read tonight, and each poet will read their poem and then introduce the next poet. And we'll just go along like that and listen to one another. I love the sounds of the kids, so please, you know, just be relaxed and enjoy the evening. So I'll start by, I just do want to say that it is really nice to have David Perez here, because just knowing that he is the 3rd Santa Clara County Poet Laureate. They started their program in 2009, and just knowing that he's there doing his thing in Santa Clara County, and he's been a friend to me and an inspiration, and his work is amazing. We'll get to hear it at the end of the evening tonight, so I just want to say how great that is. So our first reader tonight is from La Honda. Terry Adams has had poems in Poetry Magazine, The Sun, Witness, and elsewhere. You can get his first collection, which is called Adam's Ribs. It's available from Off the Grid Press. And he lives in La Honda in Ken Kesey's infamous 1960s cabin. So Terry will come up and read and then introduce the next reader. Thanks.
Heritage. Heritage usually comes down to you from someplace in the past. And all my parents, I had 4 of them, were newspaper editors. This is called linotype. Linotype. My copy boy guide walked me down vibrating stairs and further down into the stomping shuffle, clatter of the presses rolling in the basement of the Times, where the words of my father shook the earth between barrels of ink and rolls of paper taller than me, the blurred belt of news careening taut across rollers like a demented captive birdworm. This is where his words took on the strength of pounding metal, his description of the world reeling and forklifted out into trucks that huffed and lumbered off into the dawn of Indianapolis alleys. And looming above all of this, in the very heart of the press room, the linotype machine. A mountain of gasping typewriters and demented jukeboxes, whose inventor, they told me later, went insane. And the operator, dwarfed at his blazing keyboard, turns halfway toward me in his chair and bends way down to my ear and screams through all of this, "Spell me your name." So I screamed myself out, letter by breathless letter, into this ear with the hair bristling out. And way around the back of the machine, a full minute later, from this unimaginable tumble of precision arms and pinions and vats of oil and flapping shelves and heated air, my name comes to me. My name comes right out to me, wet and warm and shining with fame. Backwards. Sometimes heritage goes both ways, happening between you and someone younger. This is antique lace. Antique lace. My stepdaughter called me into the musty back room of the antique clothes shop. She had a lace bodice clamped to her sides with her elbows like a split cocoon. She asked me to button her. At that moment I knew this was the exact limit, the tips of my fingers almost touching her, the bodice gathering her breasts tighter with each white button I worked into its white loop. Then she turned with her face level with mine, her beauty there in her eyes, and said, "Next time, her boyfriend will do that." A month later, she took me to dinner. She reached for my hand. She dug her nails into the backs of my fingers and told me it had happened. And it was wonderful. She knew I could not move. She squeezed harder. She said it hurt like fire, like needles. And when I knew what she wanted, when I closed my eyes and bowed my head and turned half away, she said it hurt just like that. Heritage. Heritage always. Heritage is always happening now. Heritage is growing every minute, and you are making it. You are making it out of the news, out of your memories. It is growing out of every radio station you believe, out of what you hear when you pass Starbucks, out of the last thing you threw in the trash. You are making it out of what you say to your daughter, your son, the neighbor's son, the homeless man you look away from. If you are only looking in the rearview mirror, you are running a red light in the heart of the young man you suspect is a criminal on the corner. Have you memorized the dates of all the wars that are turning you into history? Are you learning the history in the fingers of the words? Wear the evening news as your undershirt. Daub the tears of African women into your eyeliner. Kiss your lipstick with the blood mist wafting from suicide bombings. You are the child of this minute, the child of your imagination. Imagine your face at its very best. Put your father's face into that place. Think what you would teach your father now. He might look like he is not listening, but you must teach him anyway. Thank you. Camincha Benvenutto is from Miraflores, Lima, Peru. She calls the United States her second home and keeps close to her roots, for she feels that it is much easier to get where you want to go when you're proud of where you come from. She earned her MA in 1987 at San Francisco State University and was selected by KDTV for their segment, One of Ours, to honor her contribution to the Latin American community in the Bay Area. Her poems, short stories, and a novel and literary translations have been published in English and Spanish on Lit and e-zines magazines. And she has desktop published 3 chapbooks. The San Francisco Bay Guardian said, Camincha frames the ordinary in a way that makes it extraordinary, and that is real talent.
Thank you. This is beautiful. Your energy, I feel it, and it makes me want to do my very, very best. Thank you for inviting me, Caroline Goodwin. Magical, magical, magical Cuba, Havana, Cuba. Trumpets, guitars, smiles, blue skies, lime green azure blue ocean of gentle waves, white sand at Santa Maria. Your people well done, brown, black skin, glistens in the sun, the same under the moonlight, magical. Cocos, taxis, how much? Where you going, chica? Habana Vieja. $1 across town, $1 for you, chica, magical. Figueroa's apartment transformed into a photographer's art gallery where Che Guevara, in black and white by Corda, is alive and well on 17th Street between K and L in Havana, Cuba, magical. The oral tradition lives on at El Hurón Azul, where a man mesmerizes us, reciting a story full of body language, facial expressions, intonations, reaching emotions. He tells us, when I go like this, you say green. He tells us, once upon a time there was a green man who was looking for a green house. When he found it, he knocked on the green door that was opened by a green woman, and on and on. Then a 9-year-old little girl tells us a story, then a woman, then another man, magical. And the trumpets blare and the guitar moans and the singer cries at El Gato Tuerto across the park under the full moon where we dance till morning. I close my eyes and I see your mulatto smile, like while the breeze caresses us and playfully works its way around the trees, while trumpets blare, guitar moans, and the singer cries, all the way to Hotel El Presidente at the corner of Avenida Los Presidentes and G Street, across from El Malecón, 6 blocks from the Arts and Crafts Market. In Havana, magical, magical Cuba. Havana, Cuba. Thank you very, very much. And now I can find the little for the next, oh, here. By day, John Cottonwood has worked as a carpenter, plumber, and electrician for most of his life. By night, he's the author of 9 published novels, 2 books of poetry, and a memoir. He lives under redwood trees on the side of a mountain in La Honda, where he built a house and raised a family. For relaxation, he makes bread.
Is this going to work? Yeah, it's going to work. There are many branches in my family tree, so this is a very selective family history. I call it freedom of God, freedom of whiskey. I should tell you, I've spent my life, well, she just introduced me. I've been in construction most of my life. The King of France was a fancy pants. Join the church I desire, or I'll set you on fire, was the king's decree. So Bartholomew, ancestor of me, chose to flee in the year 1686 on a sailing ship to New York, New York, a village of 800 folk with no allegiance to the Pope. Bartholomew had a grandson named Peter, with disdain of all that's pompous, with adze, fro, and Cooper's compass. Peter built barrels. Barrels for gunpowder, barrels for tea, barrels to blow the British into the sea. Peter fought for George Washington and won the war, then took his family out the door, single file on horses through the wilderness, to set up a cooperage in the land of Kentucky, building barrels for corn, barrels for whiskey, barrels for the sober, and barrels for the frisky. with ads, fro, and Cooper's compass, and with disdain for all that's pompous. Peter had a grandson, John T., who moved west of the Mississippi. John T. cut trees and slid them downhill to the river, where he built a mill, making railroad ties to meet the demand for tracks to stitch this unsettled land from California to the Atlantic sands. John T., with a gift for oration, preached against slavery, the abomination. In anger for opening his mouth, a lynch mob came from the South. They kidnapped John T. to hang him from a tree near Canaan, Missouri. The great-great-grandson of John T. is me. With tool belt, hammer, and drill, my heritage is the skill of building what people need, of toleration of any creed, of speaking one's mind, of helping mankind, with a moral compass of disdain for the pompous. We built whiskey barrels, we cut railroad ties. Now I build houses and tell you no lies. Thank you. So if that's my heritage, construction is my culture. So here's a construction poem called 5 Premium Studs. That's it. I went to the lumber yard. I said, if you please, I want 5 premium studs. I want 57 screws because my joints are unglued. I need 5 premium studs. This ain't no stick-up, just load my pickup with 5 premium studs. We can hammer all night, build a house of delight, keep it level and true so we don't get sued. If the order's too large, put it on my charge. I need 5 premium studs. That's 5 premium studs. One more little poem, and this is because this is about heritage, and we come from so many different places, but we're all here together, and our heritage is us together. I am painting my house with forgiveness. Come in, there's more than enough. I am painting my house with forgiveness, still wet, but you can touch. I am mixing a pot of colors. Come see, come stir with your hand. We are mixing a pot of colors with pigments of many a land. I am planting my garden with freedom. Kneel down, help plant a seed. We are planting the garden with freedom, no anger. We grow every creed. Amy Hoffmann is a 3rd-generation California native. She has a BA in English and journalism from the University of Southern California and currently writes poetry, teaches Pilates, and works hard as a mama to 2 small girls. She has been published in the Great American Poetry Show and Calyx. She is a founding member of the San Francisco Women's Poetry Collective and is part of the Squaw Valley community of writers. She lives in El Granada with her husband Tom, daughters Poppy and Maisie, and cat Snoop. Amy.
Thank you. This place, the buck's brown back of a place, and the doe, the sun-browned cow shit, barn owl winged rush of a place stitched into my history, the hollow slam of the screen door, the basin for rainwater, the miner's lettuce in a shady ditch. Husk-colored pages of an almanac place, May 22nd, 1923, 98 degrees, planted last tomatoes. Ghosts of barley, corn, and wheat undulate in place of harvester, place of coop, and smell of blue curl where no baby was ever born, still as an oak place. Heavy barnboard table of a place, Mayat china and tin cups, pot on a wood-burning cook stove. Won't you stay for dinner? Roads of dust and rut, shotgun crack of a place, hard smack against a shoulder, then burst Coke bottle target first, before brother. Place of outstretched arms, scraped raw, fetching wood and stacking it against the shed, escape place in the back of a pickup truck. The dove cage empty, then the country rat, now thick with finches always being born. Promise-making place, under stars, under daisy sky. Soaring cloak of a red-tailed hawk against a pale hot sun place. Choke fine dust and fillery, stories. Aren't all of us always being born? Repeating ring of olives, grapes, almonds, lupin in the spring place. Reciprocating earth. Place of brindle cow afterbirth beside a rusted 38 Chevy in the bleach dry field. Thank you. Janine McNally lives in San Mateo and devotes herself to getting to know the souls of her 5 unique children. A children's author once said, "Those who have taken the most from me have given me the most." And so it is with children. This poem is actually a children's book celebrating one wonder of growing up on a boat, and is dedicated to the actual Tom and Tommy who live on anchor on the historic schooner Reverie at Princeton by the Sea. It's also Janine's birthday today, and I think we should all sing happy birthday. Oh God, I'm a terrible singer. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Janine. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you. I think the best birthday present for me is, being here with all of you and having my 5 children here and Tom and Tommy from this poem. I've started to write poems that are little teeny books, like with illustrations. So if you can imagine this one as a children's poem book with illustrations that don't exist yet, but it's called Tommy's Boat. Tommy's boat has a big round belly, a goldfish bowl, and a bunk for Tommy, and one for Tommy's dad. It's an old fishing boat called Reverie, meaning dream by day, and they do sometimes, Tommy and Tommy's dad. A place to behold and the sea to belong to, barnacles of the heart bound strongly to Tommy and Tommy's dad. The blue heron on their dock flies off, long legs behind, as they take their dinghy, loons play in their wake, exploring elusive sieve of the sea and all that it sifts. Bring to me, whips of kelp, the seaweed's green Loch Nessness, and rocks of crabs to scuttle and climb, and to cry, a crab, to Dad. Till in the misty evening sun, heron in the sky with his great legs flies home with Tommy and his dad. Tommy climbs the bowsprit. Halyards cling, and they watch the currents green and purple, Tommy and his dad. Reverie was a fishing schooner with an old gold sign reading Captain's Quarters above the cabin of Tommy and Tommy's dad. At night, the boat is a drum in the strumming of the tide. Foghorn swollen calls, Tommy and Tommy's dad, now dreaming by night. I had one other small little poem. It's just called Love. A little word, love. A small bird, love. When it flies, all other words fly, bright and beautiful. When it falls, all fall. There are no words to fill the hole. So the next poet is Mark Prudowsky, and he's been variously a welder, mechanic, millwright, and electrical contractor. At present, he's an instructor of, I can't even say this, photovoltaics at CCSF Evans campus, and he earned an MFA at Warren Wilson College and is looking for a good writing circle. Cool. He participates in an online community called Grind. I love that name. Okay, Mark.
Thank you, and thank you, Caroline, for pulling all this together, and all the rest of you who helped. So this poem was taken from the fourth piece from Miles Davis's Sketches of Spain, Saeta, and Saeta is like a religious procession during Semana Santa, during Holy Week. So that's where the poem gets its title from, La Saeta. When Pops went away, he left something he showed me not once. Something kept in a cellar's dark room on a knotty pine shelf, and here I've withheld. It should be one word, and within an amber glow above 3 plastic trays. The chemical bath of the first to coax, to reveal, taking its time. The second bath to say, enough, no more. The third to fix things in what passes for forever in the dark room's black leather case, wherein, on a faded red velvet bed, tarnished, asleep, lies a horn. Were I to say, often I've wondered, I'd tell my second lie. It occurred to me only now to imagine a man I know mostly by stories told by ghosts I never see anymore. They've forgotten me, they've let go. Let his fingers curve, press down the ivory-capped keys, feel through the bones the valves, rise again, collapse again, as he pushes a measure of himself through the brass curves, out the bell. Every time I hear Miles and Evans, and if this time I lie, it's almost all the way true, I see narrow cobbled streets. The whitewashed stucco and stone crowd in, rise 2-3 stories above commerce. It's warm. Warm becomes hot. Windows rise. And if it means those inside share rages and petty squabbles, and in an immodest bed mambo, it's giggles and sighs, well, they are only ghosts, and no one remembers. Or if they do, they let go. Dawn breaks. Water at some distance. A fountain, modest, spout uncertain, rising, then diminished, rising again. In a plaza, lichens and moss at its base. And from each compass point, a few paces distant, narrow streets converge, each with its columns, ghosts, 5, 6 abreast, stretching back without end, solemn, with purpose, each filling its lungs, expressing, fingers curved, pressing down, rising again, letting go. Thank you. I hope I'm saying this right. Eber, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Abel Rodriguez was born and raised in Mexico and has lived in California since the early 90s. His education includes an MA in library science, and he currently works for Stanford University Libraries. I want your job. He writes prose and poetry on themes related to his experience, including immigration, biculturalism, music, and language, as well as nature, among others. Ever is a pragmatic writer for whom the common becomes the special as a way to contrast the abject against the normal.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this event. I'm proud. My heritage and my poems speak about migratory beings from southern lands, alluding to that which birds and people take with them wherever they migrate, music and poetry. The ancient Aztecs revered the mockingbird and admired the singing. The word sensontle comes from the Mexican Nahuatl language, and it means bird of the 400 voices. The Aztec also had poetry in high regard. Those who were chosen to please the gods were first instructed in music, dance, and poetry. Only after mastering those, a person could be worthy of the gods. I will read first in Spanish and then in English my poem entitled El Sensontle, translated as the mockingbird. El sensontle danzaba ya a la medianoche, húmeda, fresca y serena, a ritmos de sonidos desvelados, rumbas breves, tiempos sincopados. Un concierto del contexto urbano, motos y automóviles apresurados. Las sirenas con sus cantos y los perros consumidos en aullidos a esos llantos. Las estrellas descansaban en camastros hechos de polvo lunar borracho y sobre un zarape opaco musitaban lo brillante de sus actos. Mucha gente ya soñaba y otra tanta se internaba entre túneles inexistentes que las cálidas cobijas deparaban. Yo danzaba con Madama Insomnia, quien con diatribas repetitivas me mareaba con susurros y con cuentos sobre el tiempo congelado. Un sensontle fue el primero en rompernos la modorra, con el canto sacrosanto de sus 400 voces. Los que estábamos despiertos, sorprendidos, preguntamos, ¿ya amanece o el sensontle está soñando gloria? Thank you. The Mockingbird. Midnight was already dancing, humid but cool and serene, to the rhythms of a waking tango, brief rumbas, syncopated mambos. A concert of an urban context, cars, trains, motorcycles, sirens diffusely wailing, and dogs consumed in howling anguish. The stars rested on the cradle made of drunk moon dust, and over an opaque sarape, they mumbled on their brilliant acts. Many people dreamed already, and many more were drifting, entering those empty tunnels that only warm blankets bequeath. I was dancing with Madame Insomnia, who, with repetitive diatribes, made me woozy with a whisper and her stories about frozen time. A mockingbird then ruptured, breaking with our chant our slumber, with the sacred melody of his 400 voices. Those of us yet awake, taken by surprise, wondered, is it dawning already, or is the mockingbird dreaming glory? Thank you. And I now have the pleasure to introduce Athmika Sriram. She is a 5th grader at Encinal Elementary. She was born in Santa Fe, New Mexico. She has lived in Toronto, Canada, and Sunnyvale, California. Currently, she's in Menlo Park. She loves to draw, read, and write on her blog. How about that? Please welcome her.
Hi, before I begin, I'd like to thank Miss Goodwin for organizing this program, and I'd like to thank my family for getting me here. My poem is entitled India. When traveling the globe, there are many places you see, but few quite as exemplary, and none that could teach so much as of course India, which shows how grateful you must be and how to believe in fantasy. India's culture is very diverse, each song different from verse to verse, each language spoken in a different way, but some things about India are still the same, like some holidays, beliefs, and dishes mothers make. As you should know, India is very old. It's been around before your great-great-grandmother was born. And as India's timeline grows, its culture spreads to the farthest reaches of the earth, where almost no one lives. As the story of India's history is waiting to be told, men and women have been brave and bold, making history's story an interesting one to tell, as other aspects of India thrive as well. Art, music, writing, and folklore, food, family, and much, much more. People celebrate, people dance, and rejoice at how far India's come and how much we have to love. Because India's here and India's now, and we cannot stop how India's grown. Just as the ocean waves flow far and wide, the best secrets of India are nothing we can hide. I'd like to introduce Tanu Wakefield, who is the daughter of Indian immigrants. She grew up in Florida, but has been living in the Bay Area for almost 20 years. She has a BA and MA in English Literature and an MFA in Poetry from San Francisco State University. Her poems have been published in a variety of journals, and her work has been anthologized in Indivisible, an anthology of contemporary South Asian poets. She's working on a collection of poems called The Autobiography of Song. Tanu works for the Stanford Humanities Center and is training to be an instructor for CPITS, or California Poet in the Schools. She was recently named Belmont's first poet laureate. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. That's exciting. I'm going to follow along with some of the same lines of Indian poetry. I'm really short, so I had to take it down. I want to thank Carolyn as well, and this is such a great event, and I've just been named the Belmont Poet Laureate, so I'm very inspired by events we can do. So the first poem I want to share, I'm just going to share two short ones, is a poem about, I think Terry said in the beginning about heritage being, can be from mother to daughter and daughter to mother, that kind of thing. So this is a poem about a mother speaking to her daughter. And the first line is called Chanda Mama Urki, which is the first line of a nursery rhyme about Chanda is the moon and Mama is your uncle and Urki is up in the sky. So think of Uncle Moon in the sky when you hear this poem. Okay. Chanda Mama Urki. How I want to give you Hindi, flowing as swiftly as this milk. But I can only offer doodh or pani, pani, pani. I'll call you my beti, my Bitya Rani. Here's Kana and there's Aja. Bolo, baby bolo, I croon when you cry. Poor Uncle Moon hangs skyward, waiting for introductions, thali in hand. I know not what clatters to ground, and maybe it doesn't matter as long as you drink the sound. And I guess this poem you could see as a daughter speaking to her mother. And it's about my mom in her hometown of Moradabad, which is a place in India. So this is called Postcard from Moradabad. I'm writing you from here, Mom, a place you once called home. The mosque, still next door. The narrow streets still teem with brass makers who shape the metal into swans, and more line up at their feet, all hooves and beaks of birds. I spy a younger you, fistful of rupees in the heat, buying vegetables for the family meal. Your braids swing behind you, back and forth, tight and neat. I can almost touch them. Wait, I call, as you weave through the stalls, searching for the freshest gobi and peas. Wait while the bicycle bells peal and haul past us and the rising prayers never cease. But you don't hear me, so I leave you in your childhood and hop on a camel cart that stumbles into wildwood. I have the pleasure of introducing Rosemary Ybarra-Garcia. Rosemary is an educator and a lifelong poet. Her work has been widely published in literary journals and anthologies, including Poetry Quarterly, Lighthouse Point, and California Quarterly. Her collection, House of Song, was published in 2012, and a new book, Weaving in the Third Space, is forthcoming. She has also given many readings, including the Woman in the Muse series in Santa Cruz, Floricante in Xochitl Quequital, sorry, I'm trying to pronounce these words I'm not familiar with, Flower and Song at the DeYoung Museum, and La Raza Bookstore featured poet series in Sacramento, and as a local poet for the Half Moon Bay Pumpkin Festival 2013. She has been a member of Coast Writers in Half Moon Bay, California.
I'm short too, so that makes it very nice. I think this is a wonderful celebration of poetry, and I love poetry with a passion. That's my first love, then music, and then making soap, believe it or not. My background is from the San Joaquin Valley, and we were a family of migrant workers, and we've been here for, I was born here, so that can tell you how long we've been here, a long time. So some of my poetry will be about the San Joaquin Valley. El Sol del San Joaquin. Thirsty landscapes pray for rain, not heeding to the pleas of feathered dance rhythms. The sun rolls over valley hills in a golden bath. She stretches her feverish hands from Sacramento to Bakersfield, strokes the soft skin of ripeness, drinks from the brown soot of irrigation ditches, slumbers deep and slow in broken huts, loves wildly between the trees of silent orchards, spills yellow fruit over the twig of a child's arm, treads in dusty shoes through rows of unpicked fruit, gleans sweaty faces into a sack under a cloudless sky, smells swollen breaths from musty mouths, weaves rivers over the blackened soil, languishes in the calmness of sunset, and closes her eyes to dream of the swelling life. This next one is from my book, Weaving in the Third Space, where I write about hybridity, and it's really means a lot to me. It's called trenzas, that means braids. Weaving hair in and out, fingers dance the turning down, well-dressed garlands, ocean waves of perfect twines, trenzas long and brown, Hita wore them as a gown. Women's wings flap and flutter, errant strands in the air, mothers tug at restless manes, a storm of angry branches. cries from tangled hair, all young ladies in despair, trenzas in my blood, scores of layered choirs, hybrid voices intertwine, a parade of perfect synergy. The last one, all poets have trouble sometimes. They get mad at words because they can't get the right one. It just escapes sometimes. So I wrote one to words. Las palabras son brujas, or witches. They escape my reach, tease me in dreams, disappear in puffs of indolent smoke. Las palabras son brujas. Give less than they promise, pledge thin veils, en la luz de la noche. Las brujas traverse the moon, cackling wildly on silver-tongued brooms of straw, steal letters in their pointed hats, savor damage with abandoned warts, kernels of insensitive, soulless words, scratchy as sandpaper. But oh, las brujas of delicious words, las palabras that escape my sweet abrazo, well, they disappear in the dawning light. And now we're going to be treated with our poet laureates, and it's my pleasure to introduce them. Carolyn, and come on.
All right. Oh, man. This makes me so happy. I just can't tell you. I love this kind of stuff. And I know that there are many more cultures and languages in San Mateo County than are here tonight. And this is just a tiny little sliver, really, of our history and our shared humanity. So I'm really grateful. I've loved being Poet Laureate. I've gotten to meet so many amazing people. People who are really working hard for the arts and for our youth and our libraries and literature in San Mateo County, and we just are doing a great job, So I would like to read a few poems, and then I'll introduce our feature, David Perez. One of the things I do as your Poet Laureate is I go before the Board of Supervisors quarterly and read a poem, and it's lots of fun and scary for me, but I always feel triumphant afterwards. And the last time I read a poem called Mission Blue, which is for San Bruno Mountain State and County Park. Just a little bit of the backstory. At one of the Board of Supervisors meetings, someone gave Dave Pine a picture from San Bruno Mountain Park, and I realized I'd never been there. There's so many places in the county I still haven't been. I feel like I could explore this beautiful place for the rest of my life and still not see everything. But I hadn't been up there, so I'm like, I'm going to go and respond with a poem. And when I got up there, the first thing I saw on the sign there in the parking lot was all the different species of butterflies, or the different species of endangered butterflies, and one of them is the Mission Blue. I thought, what a perfect title for a poem. It's a great, Mission Blue. So this one is a little bit of my heritage as well, as my grandfather appears in the poem. Mission Blue. I go up before sunrise, before the light finds the promenade and salt flats and marina, the baylands and lagoon alive with willows and goldeneye. And before the door opens in the east, and the night shift clocks out, and the parents and older brothers and sisters come home to the younger ones to wake them and prepare the first meal of the day. My own heart opening into the familiar, into the old grief blue as a glacier, I go up. And when the light reaches the water at the center of every lupin, when the blue wings come like a blessing to cover my eyes, there is my grandfather leaving the garden, offering bright lettuce and the formula for a good crop, one starfish under every potato, and a layer of herring eggs in March. Hand over his heart, hand placing the last rose, the sun opening over the bay into the stone crop, into the blue wings we all hold on to there. Thank you. my grandfather was a missionary. He was raised in Iowa and went to Southeast Alaska in 1922 as a missionary. And he would put a starfish under every potato he planted in his garden for fertilizer. And he had an amazing garden. So part of my heritage is from Wales, Welsh on my dad's side. And so I brought a little Dylan Thomas to share with you tonight from Under Milkwood, which is a play, but the writing is so poetic that this brings me back to my home in Southeast Alaska, and then I'll read one poem that kind of grows out of this a little bit. So this is from the beginning, before the voices start in Under Milkwood. Listen, it is night in the chill, squat chapel, hymning in bonnet and brooch in bombazine black, butterfly choker and bootlace bow, coughing like nanny goats, sucking Mentos, 40 winking hallelujah, night in the 4 ale, quiet as a domino, in Aki milkman's lofts like a mouse with gloves, in Dye Bread's bakery flying like black flour. It is tonight in Donkey Street, trotting silent, with seaweed on its hooves, along the cockled cobbles, past curtained fern pot, text and trinket, harmonium, holy dresser, watercolors done by hand, china dog and rosy tin tea caddy. It is night, neddying among the snuggeries of babies. Look, it is night, dumbly, royally winding through the coronation cherry trees, going through the graveyard of Bethesda with winds gloved and folded and dew-doffed, tumbling by the sailor's arms. Time passes, listen, time passes, come closer now. I just love it. I'm an unapologetic Dylan Thomas fan. I love Dylan Thomas. So, and I also love walking at night, kind of a weird little thing I like to do. And in Alaska, you can hear the boats, and it's just such a beautiful time to really think about there was a lot of night up there. There was a lot of night times growing up, but just to be awake when other people are sleeping is kind of weird. And anyway, there's a street in my town called Catlean Street. So I'll finish with this poem called Night Walk, Catlean Street. Of course you can name every sound, the grinder, the ice machine, the buzz of the fish house light. Now the row of cooler vans, steady hum around the boxes of black cod, ling cod, king salmon, rockfish, scallops, coho, grade 6 to 9. It's late. Night crew Dave will be dumping the totes of bones and heads, next milt and eggs. And you can't help but consider what clings to all the pilings, fan-like, combing the tide line for scraps. You know exactly how soon you'll get home with your one grocery bag, how long it will take to unload it, to wash up, to heat your supper in the empty house. So that's my reading, my portion. Thank you. This whole thing has just made me so happy. One of the first things I did as poet laureate was I thought, oh, wouldn't it be funny to have the running of the poets at the San Mateo County Fair, and we can wear black berets and run at people snapping our fingers and scare them like bulls, the running of the poets. So that was when I first met our next guest, David Perez, and he came and ran and read, and it was so exciting, and it was awesome. So I'm just so glad that he's back and that we're all here to hear him and that we're giving, a nice reading together. So he is Poet Laureate of Santa Clara County, author of the Right Bloody poetry collection entitled Love in a Time of Robot Apocalypse. He's the recipient of the Arts Council Silicon Valley Fellowship for Literary Art, a regular guest on NPR's Snap Judgment, and voted 2012's Best Author in the Bay by the San Francisco Bay Guardian. But here's what you may not know about David. If you do go to a county fair with David, he will partake of deep-fried gator at the booth and accompany you to see the Great Alaskan Racing Pigs, which is an event not to be missed. I'd also like to mention that David has his book for sale, and I think Camincha might also, and I do as well. If you'd like to buy a book after we finish, we're here with our books. But come on up, David, and thank you. I can't remember.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Yay.
Round of applause for Carolyn, everybody, for putting this on. And keep it going for all the other readers. You know. I was introduced as the featured reader, but I'd like to sort of defer to all of the readers in the room, and I really don't think that I should be called the reader, and I hope this doesn't, or the featured reader, and I hope this isn't too trite, but I think that we are all the featured reader. We are all equally qualified to talk about this thing called heritage. And I really like what our first reader, Terry, had to say. He said, you make heritage out of what you say every day. And I like that, because I think that when we make heritage something abstract, right? So that we can intellectualize it, so that we can talk about it. But it comes to us first as something deeply personal, as something that's filtered through the people that are close to us in our lives, the people who bring us up. And so I almost never speak directly about heritage in my poetry. What the poetry leads me to do is speak about the specific people in my life. And everything I know about heritage comes through them, literally through their voice. And poetry's work with that is to see beneath the words the heritage that is created by what people say every day, and get at what I think is really important. And so all the poems that I'm going to read have to do with specific people in my life who've shown me what heritage is. This first piece is something that I stopped reading it a while ago. I put it down, and the person who it's about passed on recently, and so I'm bringing it back to life. This poem's called Quinceañera. Fearing that I would lose my roots, my grandma brought me to a quinceañera. Now this was just one of many insurrections to make sure that I did not bleach under an American sun. I remember Sunday Mass and its 3-hour ceremony held completely in Spanish at the Church of Our Lady of Perpetual Guilt. I went to places whose rituals were as strange to me as their language was foreign. Dia de los Muertos, Cinco de Mayo parades, banda shows. And if you don't know, banda is a form of music. Came out in the 30s when Mexicans began mingling with German Americans in Texas, creating a fusion between mariachi and polka. Together at last. But my grandma taught me the steps, told me that dance is the language of the soul. Tienes que permanecer mexicano, hijo, she'd say. This will help me remain Mexican. As if being Mexican were like reeling in a fish. Not something that you are, but something on the end of a line pulled so taut it cuts. And if you let go, you never see the damn thing again. Now for a while, my broken Spanish and my olive complexion sufficed. Didn't matter that I had Tarzan's vocabulary and my mother's slanted eyes. At least in her eyes, I wasn't white. I slid by. Until one day, at age 17, when my grandma found the Playboy in my suitcase. Translation, when a Mexican grandmother finds your porn and says, "Ay, Dios de mi vida, por Dios santo," it means things are going to be different from now on. From then on, it wasn't enough that we went to Sunday Mass. After the ceremony, my grandma would try to hook me up with every girl old enough to have a learner's permit. Remaining Mexican became something less like reeling in a fish and something more like finding me an anchor. And so a week later, we were on our way to a quinceañera. And if you don't know, a quinceañera is a young lady's coming-of-age ceremony. Its origins can be traced to the Aztec ritual marking 15, as the age a girl became apt for motherhood. They would light incense and dance in procession. But when the Spaniards came, the Aztec temple became a church, and the dance became a waltz. Together, at last. Inside, enough white streamers hang from the ceiling to bend the rafters, and the smell of enchilada sauce and mole thickens the air like incense at Sunday Mass. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I practice my steps while my grandma goes to work because she has got this speed date dialed in for me, sitting me next to Consuelo, Juanita, Lourdes, Blanca, Orinella, and Liz. And it does not help that my uncles keep slipping me shots of Cuervo and play drinking games based on my performance. And I don't know. I don't know if it's the booze or the pressure or the way the pink chiffon drapes from her shoulders, but when Diosalina smiles, I kiss her, long, firm, but gentle. And when I'm finished, she looks at me and screams. Translation, when a girl at a quinceañera says, it means things are going to be different from now on. Her cousins grab me. They drag me outside, throw me against a pink limousine, coil their fists, cock them back, and hold. They watch me squirm. They listen to me plea in my broken Spanish. I no try to make with her. I no try. I sorry. They let me go. Translation, pinche gringo means your heritage is something on the end of a line you let go of because it cuts you. Back inside, everyone's too drunk to remember what happened. I take my place on the dance floor. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. This is the way I remain Mexican. The boys make a circle. And the girls dance from one of us to the next, to the next. And then the birthday girl enters, sweeping across the floor. I don't even know her name, but soon I'm dancing with her. And I just look at her shoes. Their open toes make her feet look like 2 caught fish. After tonight, I will never see her again. I twirl her and she gasps. Wow, she says, you're like the best dancer here. I look up, our eyes meet, together at last. So I'm going to bounce around back and forth, some poems from the book, some poems probably from stored up here. I'm going to stick with the theme of family, basically, although I will interpret the theme of family and heritage loosely. But for this poem, no, it's quite literal. That was all about Grandma, and this is about Grandpa, who is no longer with us as well. And this is another one of those poems that I haven't read this in a long time. But when I brought Quinceañera back to life, it's making me want to bring this one back to life. So this one is called Kung Fu is Dead. We're all familiar with David Carradine, right? We still know who David Carradine is? Okay, right? Lost in David Carradine's crystalline stare, my grandfather would torque left hooks and palm thrusts, matching the choreography as far as his lazy boy would let him. Same look on his face in the garden, breathing through his teeth, adding a bite mark to his lips every time he pruned a limb too thin. The time I refused to help him, he looked at me like I was a crop circle, wondering if it was a joke or time to get the shotgun. Manual labor can be either cross-training for your dignity or steroids for your spite. Picking the zucchini, I thought, a week early would teach him. Now, the sons and daughters of field hands expect dinner well prepared. It is their allowance for mastering precision window shopping and haiku wish lists, a daily reward for sharing the fireplace when Christmas comes with its eyes on its shoes, muddied in the soil of the company farm. But that night, the stir-fry was tender as a steel-belted radial. They ground it in their jaws like cows on cud. There is a very special fear reserved for when people glare at you while chewing very slowly. The intervention was swift. My family made cutouts from my summer vacation in the shapes of all their unfinished tasks. I would learn to soften in the sun and to press myself thin against the hand-me-down anvils of work. They planned, pitching their voices so I'd hear them from the TV room. Listening to them, he tapped his cigarette, sighed like he'd heard it all before, and turned on kung fu. Carradine dug a toe in the dirt, drew back a fist, and panned a closing brigade, knowing full well he'd fall in a hailstorm if any of this was real. Both he and I leaned towards the screen, breathless, fearless, waiting for the blow. So those were about people who took care of me and showed me my place in the world. And this next one is me interpreting the theme loosely. It's about me taking care of someone else who is also no longer with us. This is a poem for my dearly departed pet lizard. She was an Australian bearded dragon, and her name was Sydney. Huh? And this one's called Talking to a Bearded Dragon. I dig your style. Hours perched under the hot lamp, defecating on the New York Times. How's that view at the windowsill grabbing you? I hope the mornings don't get dreary when the neighbors make the slow plod to the carport with their shoulders up and their eyes on their keys. Try not to think about it. Dinner time is soon. Just blink, once for carrots, twice for crickets. And thanks for being the picture of chill when markets crash and taxes are due. I bet an earthquake could just tear down the walls and you'd be all, just put them back up. I'll supervise. Or have you read in the Times about the ID chips and the toxic clouds? What about the people who think the way you do, you know, in that sans cerebral cortex sort of way? I know, amateurs. But if everything is all crickets and sunshine, what's with you clawing at the glass? Just blink, once for snack request, twice for escape attempt. Thank you. Let me see here. Give yourselves a round of applause. You guys are such a great audience. You've been a great audience all night. Sometimes people think of poetry as something that is always austere. It can never be laughed at or laughed with, or I'm in a lot of rooms where people say they like poetry, but they don't seem to be having any fun. And you guys are having fun with poetry, and that's, I think, what it's all about. Having said that, I do think that there is a time to, I don't know, how shall I say it, get serious. And so this is, I think, one of the more challenging poems, and it's written in both Spanish and English. And I couldn't do a heritage reading without reading this one. This is also about family, and it's for my aunt. sometimes I butcher the Spanish, and that's part of the meaning of the piece. It's called olvidar, which means to forget. Quiero decirte the story de mi tía. It begins con ella cuando estaba alone, el único voice of reason, the only todo, el único. I want to tell you la historia de mi aunt. It begins con ella cuando estaba corriendo por las montañas con mucho peso en su espada, corriendo más alta, termina en el hospital, forgetting todo su inglés word for palabra. Quiero decirte a story that begins with a woman running through los mountains con mucho weight on her back, running higher y higher and más alta. I want to tell you a story that begins with mountains and ends with mi tía en el hospital, forgetting todo her English word by word. She spent 8 años en un cuarto de a hospital, finding patterns in the stucco walls while the ones in her mind faded, became más darker y más oscuro. Her historia begins con immigration and ends with the flowers I brought her once per year. No pude understand her words, but I always knew her meaning. When she said, no puedo verlos, I knew to move the flowers to her bedside. She learned to speak simply around me. As she forgot su inglés, I forgot mi español. I lost it to a world of dead tongues, donde todo is translated before it's understood. También personas, even people, translated, originals, forgotten. Cuando she lost her English to 8 years of staring into off-white stucco walls, I lost my Spanish to time y neglect. I am left con language como poltergeist that tugs at my feet cada noche and makes sounds I don't want to admit I can hear. I remember her failed attempts at conversation when she groped in the dark for my name. Her palabras became el meaningless wash of television static or refrigerator buzz, una de muchos en una chorus de empty white noises. English colonized my mind. Oigo español solo en mi dreams of the dead, where I decipher the tongues de su footsteps in the hallway, y the scratches at the door. Uso una lengua I cannot speak, but somehow I understand, whose words I do not remember, pero no puedo olvidar. I cannot seem to completely forget. I want to tell you the story of my aunt, but all I have is a poor translation. Thank you. How am I doing on time? Do I have one more or two more? Or maybe one. Wait, one? Okay. Oh, Carolyn doesn't like my poetry. I'm just playing. Wait, Carolyn and I have had so much fun that it's like, you know, like I feel like you're like a sister I've known for years, and I can just make fun of you at any moment. But sometimes it's inappropriate because we're public figures. Oh. This one's from my mom. It's called Emissary. We inch forward through the mall's clogged arteries, passing Hot Topic and its employees in full zombie makeup. She says, "Don't give me a funeral, David." And as a drop in the bucket of the unpayable debt I owe her, I don't avoid the subject. Her voice tears open an old envelope and her instructions file out of it. A little get-together is fine. Aunt Carol wants to make a Jell-O mold of a frizzy-haired lady hunched over a walker. She can knock herself out. But no quaking organ, no priest outfitting the bedridden years with prosthetic meaning. No flowers. Leave him in the ground where we both belong, she says. Elevator doors slide shut. My iced coffee weeps into my hands. Escalators drag entire families to a glowing subterranean archway. I nod, yeah, sure, Mom, knowing that when the time comes and they show up cradling their fractures, they will look to me for the ritual resetting, and I will meet them with a noose around my tongue. Her eyes narrow. She knows my jellyfish routine, my perforated constitution, and I don't know what memory she is pulling from, what emissary sits for me at the table where she relinquishes her trust. But later, I will make her promises out loud, and the time-released capsule of resolve that she slipped me before I made my own lunches will spring its first leak. Now, I tell her to meet me in the food court, and on the way to the bathroom, where I am going to go sit alone and breathe until my edges stop blurring, I turn. As the escalator lifts her to the next floor, she looks into the bloom of the skylights, and she accepts their soft coronation. Thank you. I don't have anyone to introduce, but I will introduce. Welcome Carolyn back to the stage.
I think we should make fun of each other, like make some jokes and stuff.
Yeah, Carolyn, that's a great idea.
Ik pay Attenley. Ik pay Attenley.
I only speak 2 languages. Round of applause for Carolyn, everyone, please, one more time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I loved it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry. So thanks again, and I just wanted to mention one person that we left out earlier, who is Judah Tolmasoff, Carol Groom's aide, who's here and has done a lot of work for poetry in San Mateo County. So thank you, Judah. Thank you. I was recently had a chance to be in a little parade with Jerry Hill at an elementary school in San Mateo, and they said there were 30 languages there. I mean, think about that. Just think about that. Okay, enjoy the rest of your evening, and again, thank you all so much for coming out.